Penny Lee here, back. This is a continuation. So far we've talked about why I joined the military, that I was in the Women's Army Corps, basic training, physical training. Now let's dive into special duties. So I was in the postal field, but that wasn't my only job. We all had other additional duties to do. I'd like to hear what your other duties were. Did you have charge of quarters? That's QC duty. All branches are going to be called something else. Fire watch or guard duty, watching the perimeter. Did you train for war? That kind of thing. One of the special things that I did was for a month, I had the duty of if anybody, a veteran or a military person, had died in the state of New Jersey, I had a team that would handle everything needed for the funeral. And that lasted for a 30-day period. High stressful time. Okay. What other special duties did you have? Let's talk about that. Penny Lee Deer again. Continuing me reading what I'm about to say on Friday morning, 10 a.m., Virginia Tech. We're picking up with the 1970s. The year 1975 was a period of profound social, political, and economic shift. The Vietnam War had ended in April with the fall of Saigon, signaling the loss of thousands of lives and the end of the draft. This was a growing need for women recruits. The Army activated 2 battalions. We call them WACs, Women's Army Corps. It was number 17 and number 18 at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Previously, these type of units would have been at Fort McClellan, Alabama. I became one of those recruits, marking the beginning of my role as a trailblazer in military service. Growing up in rural New York, I'd love to hear your stories, where you came from and how you wanted to join the service. We'll take a little break for that. I was raised in a small town nestled in the Catskill Mountains where traditional roles were strongly upheld. The population was about 600 at the time. My high school graduating class was a modest 36 students. Most of the young women in the community chose to start families right after high school or perhaps go to college, with the expectation that they might marry one of the local farm boys. That's a pretty small pool to choose from, or maybe go to another county. Despite being told at a young age that I wasn't college material due to the struggle of learning and writing comprehension, I was determined to create a better future for myself. I later discovered that my difficulties were due to a learning disability, not the lack of intelligence. This realization would come into later, after my retirement, after I've done 20 years in the service. I was a middle child in the family of 5, and 2 of my siblings joined the military as well, one Air Force and one's also retired Army in the medical field. My dad served stateside during the Korean War. Although I considered alternative paths, such as the Peace Corps and or the Marines, a different branch, I ultimately decided on the Women's Army Corps during my senior year in high school. So I was on the delayed entry program in April 7th, 1975, before the end of the Vietnam War. Little did I know that decision would be part of living history and pave the way for future generations of women in the military. On a separate video that I've already done, I talked about basic training and I talked about advanced individual training. So I'm going to continue on. Physical training in the military. I'm sorry, we would have taken a break there. You understand that? Okay. When I was in basic training, we dressed like young ladies. We had a blouse that had to be ironed. There was shorts underneath, but it was a wraparound skirt with bobby socks and tennis shoes. We marched on to the parade field, and you did not disrobe until, or you did not start your calisthenics until you disrobed. You folded your skirt beside you until your calisthenics were done, and then you re-robed, and then returned to your barracks. We did not go around looking like a bunch of hussies. We can stop here and take a discussion on what your physical training looked like and what was the standards. How were they different from your male counterparts? Did you find restrictions? One of the other things that we did, female push-ups, meaning we were on our knees and we only bent our arms up until 1978 at least. Anybody else fall into that category? Okay. I think I'll break there. Okay. So, if you've been following each one of these segments, a lot of information was covered. Feel free to email me any thoughts you might have on what we discussed today. Let's take some time to talk about your time in service. How do you feel about it? Are you proud to be a veteran? Do you recognize yourself as a veteran? In the next segment, they'll talk about VA and all the different benefits that go along with our service. But let's talk about what we could do going forward to better our situation. Let's break now and see what people have to say. And then after this, we will be handing it over after a short break to the next folks. Hello there, this is Penny Lee Deer. I am practicing for the group discussion, a mini discussion that's going to take place at Virginia Tech at 10 a.m. tomorrow. It's lasting 50 minutes. What I'm about to read to you is a script of sorts. The difference is I will be stopping occasionally, we'll have a discussion, and then I'll pick up the script again. I will not be pausing here. I might say pause as we go for a discussion. I'm kind of practicing how long it is. I know it's a bit unrealistic to get through 20 to 30 people having the same subject matter. But again, as I saw in a different video, there is a survey available if you wish to take it. Okay, let's get started. A personal reflection. My journey in the United States Army and the Women's Army Corps, enlisted and early services. In 1975, I was a high school senior in rural upstate New York. I made the decision to enlist in the Women's Army Corps under the delayed entry program. I left for boot camp in November, unaware that I would be joining the 1st Battalion formed in anticipation for this huge push of recruits of 8,000 women into the United States Basic Training Program to take place at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, previously Fort McClellan. We were assigned to Alpha Platoon, Charlie Company, 17th Battalion, 5th Brigade. So in short, Charlie 17-5 was the Women's Army Corps unit, my cherry unit. At the time, the Women's Army Corps imposed strict limitations on women, including the prohibition of marriage and motherhood during this period of time, or risk discharge. Our platoon was notable because we had one of the first male drill sergeants, making significant steps towards the gender integration in the Army. Remember, this is 1975. Again, for practicing purposes, we would take a break and talk about what I just said in the discussions. The history of the women in the Army. The Women's Army Corps' roots stretch back to World War II and the creation of the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps, WAAC. So they're reservists. They did not have all of our benefits that we know today as veterans with active duty. This was brought up to fill the roles left vacant by the men fighting on the front lines. In 1943, the WAAC was disbanded as the WACS, Women's Army Corps, with full recognition on active duty, used this symbol of Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom and strategy. Very proud of her. The Women's Army Corps remained segregated from men until it was disbanded in 1978, becoming fully integrated into the United States Army, reflecting our history of the WACS. It seems as though the rules, something to keep in mind, if it was disbanded or the guidon was encased, it could be easily reversed. Again, in real time, we will stop and take a break for discussions. I'm having trouble with my computer. I guess I'll stop right there. I'll continue on another video. Let's talk real quick about any special duties that you might have pulled. Charge of quarters, fire guard. In my particular case, for a month, I was in charge of funerals in the state of New Jersey. If somebody died while I was that particular month, I was in charge of the details, the drills, the whole thing. Did you go on temporary duty assignments? Particularly, was there something why you were put on a special duty because you were female? Or was there some special duty you weren't allowed to do because you were female, or they didn't have the accommodations for co-ed, so to speak? We can talk about that too, your different barrack situations, living conditions, how did that change? Okay, I'll stop for now and we'll do a little discussion and get back to you. Okay, let's talk childcare or having children on active duty. What problems did arise when you were trying to find care for your child? Was it a problem at all? Was it a financial burden? Tell us some of those situations. Did it come up in your everyday life? For instance, we were on duty basically 24/7. You had no idea what time of day you're going to get off if you're even coming home. In the particular field that we were packed ready to go at any given time. So tell us about, were you a sole parent maybe? What was the specifics going on with children in the military, which are called brats, by the way? In my particular case, since I was in for 20 years, my children grew up in the military, and they actually liked it and like rotating every 3 years and things like that. Okay, we'll take a break, have a discussion, and be back with you. Okay, let's talk about our jobs in the military. When I first joined, I was a postal clerk, and I went to Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana. This was quite interesting because in basic training, we were completely segregated. Our whole battalion was all female. When I went to postal school, it had all the branches, male and female. So quite significant. And the reason they did that particular thing was we actually followed the guidelines of the DSM manual, Domestic Mail Manual from the United States Postal Service. Still today, that's what they use in the Army Post Office and in civilian post offices. Okay, so what was your job? Is it the job you wanted? Were there jobs that you were told that you didn't qualify for? And if so, was it because you were female? Or aptitude, or what was the situation? And then later on, I would reclassify. And does anybody fall into that category where they changed jobs somewhere along the line? Okay, let's hear from everybody. Continuing on with our discussion. When I first joined the Women's Army Corps, you were not allowed to be married and you were not allowed to have children. If you happened to have had children, you had to relinquish custody to those children until you were done with your service. Who in this audience today can speak to that? Did they fall into that category, or was it a different situation? Now, if you look at the laws that were in place, this was all supposed to come to an end in 1978. I can tell you that where I was stationed, they didn't get the word. When I went to go get married, it was my company commander who had to give me permission to get married, and I was 21 years old. And then when I had my first child, which was 1979, they said, you can get out if you want to. They would allow you to be discharged. Now, they're not saying that I had to get out. However, they had me sign another contract, both when I got married and when I had my first child. So those timelines don't add up. They were behind the times for sure. And then, to take it even further, I had another child in 1984, and that's exactly what they said again. No other contract, but they said, you can get out. You don't have to stay in if you have a child, right? Well, yeah. So who else today can talk about pregnancy, being married or not married, and also maybe how that changed throughout the years? So I was from 1975 to 1995. Significant changes happened for domicile type situations. Okay, we'll take a break. Be back in a little bit. Good morning, Penny Lee Deer here. This is a practice for tomorrow between 10 a.m. and 10:50. The whole thing will be videotaped and live feed on YouTube, I'm told. I thought I would start off with my enlistment basic training. I actually was in the Women's Army Corps, which was from 1943 to 1978. I joined in 1975, very much segregated, all women by themselves. I did go to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, which originally it was at Fort McClellan, Alabama. One of the things significant is I was actually part of two of the battalions that stood up at Fort Jackson, the 17th and the 18th, because there was a push for 8,000 women to join the service after Vietnam. We lost so many people, the draft was over, they needed recruits. You'll see that repeated through history time and time again. So I think I'll take a mini break here, get some feedback from other people who in the room were during that period of time up to from 1943 to 1978. Show of hands. Different branches. Let's go through those branches real quick, because they were called something different than the Women's Army Corps, of course. You had waves, spars, the Marine women, the Women's Air Force, the Nursing Corps. Okay, so we'll get some feedback, and then real quick about the type of training that we did. We were young ladies. We were taught personal hygiene and makeup and proper etiquette. However, we were not limited to that. We did everything that our male counterparts did. We worked with the Claymore mines. We went to the range. We went to night fires. We did bivouacs, field training exercises, excuse me. We did have We were one of the first folks to have a male drill sergeant, which was a unique experience. Again, let's stop right here. If you were in this period of time, did you have a male drill sergeant or a female drill sergeant? The reason why, as you go through periods of time, the whole philosophy on basic training and the women being integrated will be up again. Let's see. I have much more to tell about that, and we can look on that too, but let me stop this video right now, and then the next time we come on, maybe we can talk about how things were different from basic training to your advanced individual training and permanent party. See you in a little bit.